In today's module, we're going to actually get started with some query writing. We've been spending a lot of time building up the foundations and the basics. We're finally going to start deploying that and writing some queries. So I'm really excited. A high-level overview of this module is first we're going to start with my first query. So I'm going to be writing a query and showing you the different keywords. We'll take a slight segue into reviewing BigQuery file paths, and we'll wrap up this module with you writing your own query and getting some practice under your belt. For time budgeting, this first video will take about 15 minutes. The BigQuery file paths will take 5 minutes. And the last video, it's recorded for 11 minutes. It might take a little bit more or less, depending on how much time it takes for you to draft up your query. So with that, let's get started with my first query, and we're going to learn how to use the select, from, and limit statements. So let's go over those keywords in more detail. Select. What select means in BigQuery is it tells us which columns are we selecting or choosing. If you want to choose or select every single column in a table, you can do select asterisk, or as we in the field call it, select star. And that's a shortcut so that you don't have to name every single column. If I do select star, BigQuery knows I want to choose every single column. In comparison, if I wanted to select only a few columns, I have to specify them by name and separate them with a comma. We'll go over an example showing you exactly what this looks like on a little toy set, and then I'll do a live demo. The next keyword we're going to review is from. From tells BigQuery what data, what table are we looking at. So select says which columns do I want. From tells us which table or which data do I want to pull it from. Something to keep in mind with BigQuery tables is that they all follow a special format. The table names always start with a backtick. This little thing here, it almost looks like an apostrophe. And then it has something called a project name, a data set, and a table name. We'll break this down in a couple slides, but just keep that in mind. The last keyword we'll review is limit. Limit is the easiest keyword in my opinion because it just reduces how many rows you want to see. So whenever we're pulling our data, we always want to have that limit keyword on. That way we don't accidentally pull 10 million rows. Because if you remember, BigQuery, the larger the query, the more data that you're pulling, the more expensive it is. So if I always have a limit of 5, 10, even 100 rows, that keeps my usage really tight and efficient. And this is typically used when we're exploring data. So we don't want to do a big query just because we want to poke around and see something. So a question you might have is, what is a backtick? Never heard of it. So if this is your keyboard, the backtick, it's this button right next to the number 1, and you have a little squiggly line, almost looks like a mustache. That's called a tilde. And the other thing underneath it, that is the backtick. So to access a backtick, you just click this little button right here, and then that will be in your query editor. If you remember when we were going over the select statement, I said that you could do select star and select all of the columns, or you can list them by name. Let's break that down. So as I said before, select star tells BigQuery to return all of the columns. We can also use select to return only specified columns. Let's use a little example table. Suppose this is my data, and I have 3 columns. I have name, species, and color. And I see if I look down the name, I have Bo, Milo, Jinx, King. I have the species, dog, cats, one little prince for my little baby, and we have different colors. If I said select star to BigQuery, this would return every single column. So we see name, species, and color. Now let's say I only wanted to pick 2 columns, name and species. So I don't want to see color when I return this. I only want to have column name, column species. How I would do that is I would say select name, comma, species. And what that would return is only the name, only the species. Now that we've gone over at a high level what these keywords look like, I'm going to open up the BigQuery tool, and I suggest that you open up yours as well and follow along. We're going to do 2 quick examples. 1, we will pull all of the columns in our data set, and 2, we'll pull specific columns. So let's open up that BigQuery console. When you open up your BigQuery console, it's going to look something like this. And you're going to have your home page. If you click the untitled, or you can open up a new query editor, now we can start writing our code. I already have some notes put together. So if you remember, this is a multi-line note. So I'm putting a section, examples 1 and 2, demo. And this is the table that we're going to be using. This table is going to be in our video description, so you can just do a copy paste. So in our first example, we want to select all the columns and only 15 rows. Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to just do a quick copy paste here. And what you'll do is you'll do a copy paste from our video description. We're going to type in our first keyword, select. And since we want all the columns, I'm going to do select star. And then where do I want to pull the data from? Well, I already have it. I want to pull it from this table here. So I'm going to type from, paste. And the last thing I want to do, and this is for our data usage, is I'm going to put limit 15. So now that I have this, I have select, I have from, and I have limit. BigQuery, it already told me, hey, I took a look at this and this query is going to run and it's going to take 47 gigabytes, which is a very small amount of data. To run my query, I have 2 options. I can highlight and click run, or you can use a key shortcut, Control Enter. So let's take a look here. So I did select star, give me all the columns from this table and only return 15 rows. And I see vendor ID, pickup date time, drop off. If I scroll all the way, I can see I have all the columns. And then if I want to look at the number of rows I have, we have a little shortcut here that tells us this window is showing us 1 of 15 rows out of a total of 50. And the total amount that each page will show is 50. So if I scroll down, I also have my row numbers here so I can triple check. If I scroll down, I see, okay, it stops at 15 rows. If you're having any issues with running your query, I have a debugging video that I would recommend that you take a look at, and that should help you troubleshoot some of these things. Okay, now that we've done the first example, let's do an example where we are only pulling 2 columns, vendor ID and payment type. Now, before we move to the next one, I'm going to show you 2 quick things. If I highlight these rows and I hit control question mark. BigQuery does what we call commenting out. It turned my query into a note so it doesn't read it anymore. So let me type that out for you. If you hit control plus question mark, the BigQuery console will automatically comment out your code. Why do I want to do that? I want to do that because I don't want to delete all this hard work that I just did writing this code, but I don't want to accidentally run it again. So now that I already have my code here, I'm just going to do a control, paste, copy, paste under example 2. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll highlight it and hit control question mark. If you hit control plus question mark on lines that are commented with the double dash, the console will uncomment. So now I already am halfway through. I already have my select, my from, my limit. And now what I want to do is, instead of selecting every column, I want to select 2 columns, vendor ID and payment type. So let's do it. So I'm going to delete this star and I'm going to say select vendor ID. And I always put my selections for columns on a new line. You don't have to, but this is my preferred way of formatting my queries. So vendor ID, payment type. So now I'm going to run. Now I'm going to pull up my results. And I see before, if you remember, I had a whole bunch of columns. They went all the way down the page. Now I only have vendor ID and payment type. And when I look at them, I can see I have 1, 2, 15 rows. So what we just did is we demonstrated how to pull every single column in a table and how to pull only 2 columns. And this might feel a little trivial or kind of like, okay, this doesn't feel very fancy. Just keep in mind that we're learning the basics now, and as we progress, we're going to quickly build on these. So it's very important that we understand the basics so that we can elevate our skills and start learning things that are a little more complicated. Before we wrap up this lesson, I have a few more things I wanted to review in our PowerPoint slide. So let's take a look. To wrap up what we covered in this lesson, we learned the following keywords: select, from, and limit. We completed a demonstration where I selected all of the columns in a query and another query where I only selected a few columns. In the next lesson, we'll go into more detail on those BigQuery file paths and then round out this module with you writing your first query. See you next time. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, I would be so appreciative if you could like the video and subscribe to help me create more content for you. Thank you.